Hello, welcome, hey, everybody.
Hello.
Wonderful to see you.
It's good to see everybody, and we're all off mute at the same time. It's fun when we remember to click buttons.
We were all on time today.
We were on time.
That's right. Are working.
And our guest was on time, and it's all worked out. What's going on? Something else, like somebody's car is breaking down today because you can't have all these positive things that are happening. Something has to go wrong.
Okay, so you're not the optimist
today. Too early.
Okay, noted.
It's not that I'm not an optimist, Joy. I'm just a realist.
Yeah.
It's based on data.
It's science.
Oh, it's a wonderful day today. 23rd.
Science. It is a nice at the beginning of the day. You're at the end of the day. You should tell us in the future how the rest of the day looks.
Is it great?
It's gray. It's cold.
Oh,
summer's gone. I'm in my end of summer blues. Yeah.
Oh.
Do not have that problem here.
Oh.
It's in the 90s somewhere here in Dallas.
Wow, Texas.
I know. It's
a little chilly here today, but it's supposed to rain. It's our cool down. I don't see 90s in our forecast at all for the week.
I'm still trying to adjust and waiting for it to the cool down to happen so I can just go outside and enjoy it in long walks and not just go outside for 2 minutes and be like, I'm sweating already.
Welcome to the South, friend.
Well, welcome to Guardians of M365 Governance, episode 21. Ooh, I need to have that sound effect with the echo there. This is the series, is a monthly webcast focused on the rapidly evolving and expanding Microsoft 365 governance story. Our goal is to share insights, best practices, and the latest information about new governance features and capabilities within M365. So it's dedicated to everything governance within the ecosystem. So if you have questions or comments or thoughts about what should we cover or guests that we should include, please comment.
Even if it's yourself.
Yes.
Come on, let's talk governance.
Of course. For this 21st episode, we welcome a longtime friend and fellow MVP, Richard Harbridge, who, after many years in the consulting world, has traded in jerseys, enjoyed one of the leading M365 solution providers, ShareGate, as their strategic alliances and ecosystem manager. Welcome, Richard. If I could show him on stage. There he is.
Hey, everyone.
Hey,
welcome.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And, speaking of getting sweaty, the best thing to do in the morning or whenever people are watching this is dive into data. So I can't wait to share some of the State of Microsoft 365 report and insights that we've gained and talk some governance with you guys.
Prepare for the mental sweat.
That's right. Yeah. You can move, while we're doing this. It gets me excited. So.
You have one of those under the desk treadmills?
I actually do.
I'll
show maybe a behind the scenes view, and you guys can see me in shorts and stuff. Exactly.
Yeah, pants are optional in the era of modern work, right? Got your sneakers on, got your treadmill going.
I was thinking about getting one of those again. Liam Cleary has one, and I remember here, I'm like, are you outside running? He's like, no, at my desk, and he's sitting there. He took himself off camera for it, but I could hear him going. But one of my sons and I are thinking about doing some of these digital marathons.
Yeah.
So having that and just be walking and running from the office.
There you go.
And then kind of tracking the mile. Folks that you're not aware of that, you can kind of track your pace across. We're talking about doing like a Lord of the Rings.
I will show a picture maybe again behind the scenes. I have a picture of the Middle Earth map. And I have an elliptical, and I tracked progress. It's very far to get from the Shire to Mordor.
Yes, it is.
It's taken me almost a year and a half. So,
wow.
But you can do that yourself. You can just there's websites that have the data, ChatGPT or whatever.
Copilot. Yeah, but then you don't have the medallions at the end and unlock.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
We need our validation.
Well, we're talking today, Richard, about the latest benchmarking report that ShareGate has produced on Microsoft 365. So I know that it covers a few different areas. Governance is one piece of that. So migration and governance and and adoption
It's
data
definitely
out
the
of that?
through line, right? Like we could talk about Copilot, and Copilot, we all know, drives off of governance, right? Governance is what makes it scalable, sustainable, successful. We can talk about migration, which really consolidation is driven again by Copilot a lot today, where a lot of people want more of the data in there, and then once the data is in there, how do we, make it make sense? How do we make it safe? How do we make it scalable? So, I think it's all really related. Maybe I'll share a screen for a second, and I'll just show people where they can get the report, and then we can kind of talk through some of the data. So inside of the ShareGate website under resources, there's a book and guides, or we'll create a link for you guys. So this is the report itself. And the report is a bit dense, but it is set up in a few ways. So one of the first things within the report is it does break down how we got the data. So the data is based on a large number of survey participants. These were all Microsoft 365 admins and IT pros. And we basically surveyed them across different regions, 650 IT pros. And then basically they provided a number of different responses. And then we broke those down in these benchmarks. Each section, again, just for reference, has these sort of key lessons, which is really helpful to kind of save time. And I thought what would be really great is to talk about what I think personally are the most interesting insights, especially as they relate to governance. So you might be surprised I'm starting with migration, but actually I think this is really important. One of the things I've been really thinking about a lot because I've transitioned to focus on a vendor that does so much migration and Microsoft 365 governance. I've been thinking a lot about that journey, right? When you have a legacy environment or you have a tenant-to-tenant merger, like think of an M&A or something like that. In both those scenarios, you have to take the governance as it is here, and you have to reconcile it with the governance that's there, right? And so working through that has always been an interesting challenge. And we can see that in both instances, there's a lot more consolidation to Microsoft 365 that's happening. And this is happening from sort of legacy to leading edge, file share, SharePoint server, et cetera, with a very significant increase. We expect it to keep declining, right? Because the number of on-prem server environments should over time decrease. And then we also see the increase in tenant consolidation. And again, there's a bunch of interesting anecdotes here, but one of the consistent survey responses was Copilot and the promise of the value that Copilot provides on your data is really driving a lot of consolidation and connection. And so I thought that was a really interesting starting point for the discussion. And, I've got a few more things to highlight here, but any comments from you guys on this particular insight?
Well, go ahead, Joy.
Well, I was having a conversation not too long ago. I can't remember. It was probably one of the TechCon conferences. And someone asked, well, people are even still doing migrations anymore because blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, no. People are still coming in to Microsoft 365 brand new.
Yes.
Right. We know that it's happening so much. I still get people in my sessions that I'm like, okay, who here has been in the Microsoft world for a year or less? Hands go up. 2 years or less, more hands go up. And then those of us in our organizations that have been in it for a while, like you said, tenant to tenant migrations, things change, they need to modernize, or maybe they did such a horrible job at the first one. They're just going to start fresh, clean it up. Again, you mentioned we might talk about some migration governance pre and post. That's a big conversation because there's still a lot of work that is happening and a lot of work that needs to be done.
Well, I'm interested to know too, Richard, whether you looked at because you made the comment about the eventually the the number of on-prem installs, like those numbers will go down. I think part of what I do understand, having run studies on looking at the on-prem world, that even Microsoft 4 or 5 years ago was surprised. Still, it wasn't the hockey stick growth that it was in years past of on-prem SharePoint, but was still growing. Net new installs was still happening.
Yeah,
I don't see any data. Did you capture any data around that?
Let's share screen again. So I think one of the things that is interesting in the survey, basically one of the reporting insights, and we of course get conflicts like this all the time. So why do people move to Microsoft 365? Well, we've already addressed, the elephant in the room. One of the big drivers is that people want Copilot, right? They want to enable Copilot and all that really rich data in like Purview, where you can see like where the data flows and, is it going to these other AI agents? If that data is not in Microsoft 365 or connected, right, to Purview, then you're not going to get that visibility. And so that becomes actually an interesting driver. But when we actually asked people about this, what surprised us was that people were very conflicted. The same people who actually answered that the number one reason that they're migrating to the cloud was security improvements. also answered the number one reason that they're remaining on-prem is data security and control. And that becomes an interesting, when you really break it down, there's a lot of reasons for this. Think of data sovereignty, think of scenarios where you want to have control of the data plane, not just the control plane, right? Control plane is the Microsoft 365 experiences and more. And so in that way, it makes a lot of sense that organizations are, struggling with this particular transition. And while there's tools like, again, just a plug for my wonderful parent company, the ShareGate and other tools can help you get there faster without losing, permissions, fidelity, those types of things. The reality is you still have to reconcile, what does that security layer look like? What does that post-migration compliance look like? And it's the number one challenge in both migration and post-migration, which is what the insights told us. So we can see here an example where, the biggest challenge with migrations, whether it's M&As, that's, consolidation, think of tenant to tenant most of the time, or whether it's on-prem to cloud, legacy to leading edge, in both instances, security and compliance is really top ranking. And, you'd think at this point, we've kind of figured out, a lot of that, through tooling, through best practices, but it is one of those things that gets really complicated. And partly the reason for this is we're trying to get there fast, right? So there's a lot of, rapid consolidation happening in the marketplace. And as we look to consolidate faster and faster, that leads to a lot of concerns or challenges. Like a really simple example, when you go from legacy SharePoint Server to like Microsoft 365, we have to think about, how Teams works and how the memberships change. And so if you start to scale that pattern, it does require us to kind of rethink permissions, think of external sharing scenarios, think of all sorts of different compliance layers. And these are all part of governance, right? We think of everything from the life cycle of the spaces we have to, how we permission and control them. And, one of the things I've always said that I love about migrations is you spend all this time learning about your data, how is it structured? Where is it? Who owns it? Which department leads this? And you need that because you need, the validation. Did this person, check boxes that it's been migrated? Is it successful? And then we throw that away most of the time after the migration's done, instead of using that as the foundation for a large amount of the governance that we do in Microsoft 365. And so, I think that makes a big difference and is definitely consistently shown in the State of Microsoft 365 assessment and surveys that we've done, where we see again and again that, security, compliance, these are challenges that people, need support. They need ways in which it can be done more easily, like, some quick tactics like bulk editing or cloning permissions or things like that. Again, all things that, you can do with different tools. And I'm specifically using examples here with ShareGate. But I think that's certainly one of the big patterns that we're seeing.
One of the comment that I've made to your team there at ShareGate a few times as well. And I think we've talked about it in past episodes. I think one of the mistakes is thinking of a migration as this one-time thing. And I know that I don't have the right wording for it, but I think of it of, having participated in, actually my beginning of my SharePoint career was doing inside Microsoft internal migrations for 2003 to the 2007 version. And then doing some with 2010, and then, working for ISVs, kind of all the other flavors of that, is the fact that it isn't a one-time, it's an ongoing, it's a change management activity, because teams reorg, business needs change, structure changes. I'll throw into the mix here. Like, I think sprawl is a healthy, good thing, not because of the nature of the mess that it goes and creates, but because people are using the technology. They're getting their hands dirty. I'd rather have people out when they say that they're gardening, that they're having to wash their hands afterwards. It means that their hands were in the dirt. You need to have a platform that helps you go in. Yes, look at the learnings that you had from the last time you did the migration, move the things across, but also that can help you much more quickly and say, all right, we're consolidating these, we're merging these teams, we've created this new business unit. What's working here? How do we take their infrastructure, replicate it over here, do better? That it's a change management activity. Like, I don't know, have you thought about that at all? Like, I don't know what the phrasing for that would be, just because people think of the migration, but then they think of that one time I move from A to B.
The permissions piece of it too. Let's pretend in a perfect world we can leave the content mostly alone. Sure. But Like you said, teams change, roles change, groups change. And Richard, to your point, you already did your security checklist, right? We have testified that all this is correct, signed, sealed, delivered. We're moving it over. It's great. We've set up our permissions. Well, what about a year later? What do we check against? How do we make sure that's still correct? It's continuous. It's a continuous exercise to keep our eyes on that data.
I think, one of the things I always love is how do you frame this as an IT ownership challenge, right? Because so often when we talk about, these change managements and adapting, we're like, well, IT provided it and IT got it up there, or IT, did. And so like we're there to make sure people don't, crash and cause issues, but we're not there to necessarily drive efficiency. And I think that framing of governance as an efficiency driver is so important. I think that's the right way to frame governance. Ragnar, I was thinking of a discussion we had recently where we were talking about shadow AI and, shadow IT challenges, and especially like how they affect governance. And I was thinking more and more, like, so often we know that it's easier in the cloud, right? We can discover these shadow AI scenarios a lot easier with like the, data capabilities within Purview to kind of see where things are moving that I showed a, very, very brief visual up earlier. And so one of the things that I was thinking a lot about is, when do we like use compliance as an accelerator, to support everything from, shadow AI to other things? And one of the things I constantly think about is the reason people go to like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and they take their corporate data. Sometimes it's from on-prem, like a file share or SharePoint. Sometimes it's from Google or some other, repository, and they throw it into this environment because two reasons. One, they do it because it helps them and they need to do it fast and easy. And they don't have access to Copilot because maybe the data is not in Microsoft 365 or connected to Microsoft 365. So we see that a lot. And surprisingly, that's why consolidation is so important, because the more we consolidate and connect to Microsoft 365, the less reasons people have to go outside of Copilot to these other services, especially if they know what Copilot can do. And then the secondary thing is, if they go outside of it, it also gives us an opportunity to discover that. And that goes back to this idea, is it really, more compliant and secure on-prem, again, from the data control layer, or is it actually better, in the Microsoft 365 world? And that's, again, I think where there's a lot of misinformation and confusion. And again, we have different status insights from customers on where they are in their journeys to using the full capabilities of governance in Microsoft 365. And, I'll share some of that as well. But I just wanted to get your opinion and perspective on that, Ragnar, because I know we talked about shadow AI quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a real thing, and we can measure it in DSPM for AI in Pureview. It's always a hot race currently to find out the best AI tool. Copilot has made tremendous progress over the last weeks and months, but still others are also investing heavily. And now in every single tool, you can add your own data. So this bring your own data is literally everywhere. Google Drive, OneDrive. So it's so easy to hook up your data. It's not like in the past where we just uploaded single files and single PDFs. You can just add your whole cloud storage to it. That makes the shadow AI topic much more complicated. I see that people are using it because then they can control the data. So they would rather use their own Google Drive or part of OneDrive because they don't trust that they would get perfect answers from the massive corpus they have in their company with the hundreds of SharePoint sites, hundreds of teams. They rather trust in their own selected subset of files which are stored in OneDrive or Google Drive. I think this is also something that we have to recreate kind of trust, that we say, listen, the quality of the corporate data is so high, you can just use M365 Copilot, because otherwise we would have a knowledge management nightmare where everybody would work in their own little OneDrive subsets. Sharing would not be there, so everybody would only have their own OneDrives and then upload their own limited OneDrives to Copilot, which would perfectly in Copilot and in AI. But from the knowledge management point of view, it would be an absolutely nightmare, and we would be decades thrown into the past.
I think that's why we're also excited about the knowledge agent, right? The latest updates from Microsoft, being able to find old site pages and archive them, being able to add metadata and enrich your content to figure out like, what is this content and how do we reconcile it? The example I always think of, again, we see this a lot in consolidation. You have like one in governance, you have a folder structure up here and it's, product by year, by, region. It has like, this is the new structure. This is what they use in Teams by folders. And then in the source, maybe it's different. It's like product, group, all these other categories. And so what you have to do is you have to reconcile those two. Well, now with organize this library, with this, document processing that's free until December, right? For a large number of customers where they can do like a lot of these processes automatically or in the preview. You can use it within the knowledge agent. If you haven't played with it yourself, I encourage everyone to, stop listening for a second, go, do the PowerShell, turn it on, at least for a couple sites, and then see exactly how it can help with those.
Leave this recording open and
that's right. Come back
and then go check it out and then come back. Right.
That's great.
But yeah, it brings me up this other interesting data point. So maybe we'll share a screen again. One of the other things that we've kind of been dancing around is this idea of confidence. Now there's confidence in our data, but then there's also, from a governance perspective, confidence in the platform. And I found this really interesting. Most people are pretty confident in Microsoft 365 and, from a compliance perspective. Remember, these are some of the same people that were saying, no, we stay on-prem for these reasons. 66% of these people still had SharePoint 2016, 2019, as an example, running in a production environment, right? So, it's not like this representation of customers is, and people who are filling this out is all cloud first. And what we see there is while people are confident that the compliance capabilities are better in Microsoft 365, what they struggle with is, is it better right now? And I think that brings up this really great comment from Joanne, and we've all said this as well. Like, we often worry about these theoretical gaps, but just having it enabled, like Purview, having these possibilities where you can at least see what kind of data you have, having, the ability to use knowledge agents within specific and targeted sites. Those are things that are available the second you move that into the cloud. And because you have this capability, even if you're not using it all, it's hard to say that that's not better than what we're doing today. And, maybe a good reason to get there faster, right? And, like that capability we talked about for Purview, seeing Copilot interactions. And then the other one that I thought was really interesting about all this, I'll just skip a little bit ahead here. This is just like how to set up governance right. But, and you guys will probably feel this as well. One of the other key questions we asked people was about governance. So we said, hey, when it comes to maintenance, for management, for governance in Microsoft 365, what are the big challenges that you're experiencing? And what people consistently said was security and access controls, not a surprise. Policies for governance, we can talk a little bit more about what those are. And then again, I just want to highlight this fifth point, again, data sprawl and lack of organization. And so we can see that a lot of people, while adoption is still important, as we addressed earlier, a lot of it is kind of interconnected, right? The sprawl and lack of organization makes it really hard to ensure proper security and access controls. It makes it really hard to do managing governance policies because things are changing so rapidly. And so again, I think that this is an interesting one. Not because, this is surprising. I think all of us know that this is the big challenges in Microsoft 365, but this was my favorite stat. The idea that only 1% of organizations are using purpose-built tools to support governance. So many are using scripts, like manual policies is like scripts, PowerShell techniques to manage this. And an enormous number are using just built-in Microsoft tools. And that is really surprising to me because, you're going to feel this, it's very challenging if you're not at least doing some level of investment in governance, right? Whether it's scripting, whether it's some processes that you're automating on your end, or whether it's third-party tools. And so this was really surprising to me. And I know, Joy, you work with, a vendor that does governance just like ShareGate does. So, this was something that I thought was just a really fascinating insight from, again, this Microsoft 365, admin IT pro audience. Like, these are people that they live and breathe Microsoft 365, yet very few of them are using purpose-built, investment style governance solutions.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
The interesting part is that we see a correlation. If people are not sharing enough in the future in SharePoint and they're only uploading documents in their private OneDrives, which they are not sharing anymore, and they're just using Copilot to access their OneDrives, where they're just sharing with a very, very few people, then the adoption of Copilot goes immediately down because Copilot has just to less content, data, food.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to work with professional tools like Orchestra, like ShareGate, to make sure that people are still using ShareGate as a place to share content, because otherwise everything would be locked in personal OneDrives, which is okayish for Copilot, but not from the knowledge management point of view, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. So I think this is a huge thing where adoption of Copilot needs to focus on, because technically Copilot works pretty good, but at the end you need data, you need information.
Well, and the data needs to be in the right places too, and people need to understand that a lot of the features, the capabilities that they see and they get excited about, like to be able to have an agent that's in a channel in Teams that knows everything about the project, everything that's going on with the channel. It breaks when you then siphon off your discussion or doing private chats that should be there within the channel discussions. When you're doing things, over in, I mean, there's integrations with Outlook and other things, but again, you're going off and you're not using the tools the way that they're designed to be used, so that the data is in the right places around that. I also is interesting about that data point. I did catch that about, was it less than 1% of the companies that are using a third-party application? But I'd be interested to know a filtered view of that stat of those organizations that think that they're doing a good job at governance, and whether the percentage goes up in those. Because the problem, I mean, having worked with a number of these ISVs in this space over the last 15 years, we all know, in this space that the number one competition for third-party tool is well, the Microsoft out of the box, but I can build it myself, do it myself. So it's more the scripts. It's we don't need to pay for a tool to do this. And so, but it's the same with security until there's a breach. And then they realize, oh crap, obviously can't do it ourselves. We need to go buy technologies to fix this. Governance is something where nobody wants to pay for preventative health. They just want to go and they want the emergency. They want the lifeline when it all goes wrong.
Richard, what was your line the other day? We were talking about this on the underground. Nobody wants to buy the vitamin.
Yeah.
They want
we perceive these things like governance investments as or employee experience, et cetera, as like vitamins, or do we look at it as like headaches and Advil? Like, are you dealing with the pain? And I think for sure, I'll share one more industry insight if that's okay. One of the last things I'll highlight, and I'll get away from slides for a second. This is like on page 53. Again, really great, report. I highly encourage everyone to read it. But one of the things in it that's really fascinating, to your point, is what drives all that consolidation we saw earlier. What drives all that investment in governance? And what we found, the carrot or the thing that's driving it is Copilot. And the headache, the problem, that I think Ragnar, you eloquently stated earlier was, if you don't invest in data quality, relevance, so we have the data in Microsoft 365, is it, shared in the right ways? Is it accessible, to people and Copilot? Then Copilot's value is significantly weakened. And then secondarily, security and access management is key for us to scale it. So, we have this drive for innovation. Everyone wants to throw more, agents and more capabilities. But if we don't have, the right approaches to scale, right, and sustain it, then we're going to run into challenges. And so that overlap that you mentioned earlier, we see that, number of people who are using it native. Again, the data, because I can't show that data, but the data is very clear. Those are the people that are most frustrated, with security and, some of those things we mentioned. And then again, there's a mix there on manual. And then the secondary thing we see is those who use something like, Copilot, because we also have in the data, there's a cross section of people that are using Copilot. They've already deployed it, they've run into that. They're running into different challenges. And those challenges, again, often echo the same challenges and scale. And it's not often ROI, although that takes a lot of headlines. It's not often even internal expertise for governing AI, although that's relevant. It's still these top two concerns. And I would really frame this as this is a consolidation discussion in quality for data. And then I think really for simplicity, the security and access management is how do you do that at scale? And, I think those are such key criteria in any of these discussions.
Well, does this go back to your earlier point you talked about at one of the last screens where like the number two, kind of gap there is around policy. And so part of that is, something I always say with, a good friend with Sharon Weaver and our project management show. And we talk about like, I don't care what your approach is, your methodology, just have one. And for governance, so there's a number of things and people are pitching their methodology, their system, their tool, whatever. But the benefit is that all of them have 80-90% of the same, and it will put you where you need to be around a lot of this. And so is part of the problem, part of the gap when you brought up the policy point is that they don't know what they should be doing and then how best to apply those and then maintain those. Because one thing to deploy it initially, and then there's another thing to get in that operational state and they can run and adjust to things.
No, I think that's a really fair comment. So I'll share like a ShareGate perspective of it, or at least that my perception of it. I think one of the biggest challenges is we're all very busy. And so how do you take we don't have money. So like, how do we take something like governance that we all know we need, to spend money on, to invest in, and how do we make it accessible and easier? And I think, there's the reason purpose-built tools, or even just like, community resources like this are so important is because we can use them to understand what are we missing? What are those gaps? So assessing, right, our gaps is the very first step. And you can't know what you don't know, right? And so we often overestimate our understanding. In a lot of times, what we're finding, even in our earliest, we have this Protect, like a new version of a governance solution set from ShareGate. There's a preview. Maybe I'll share a link, and you guys could have people if they want to sign up for early access to it. We'll do a bigger launch at Ignite. This is an important area because what we're finding is people really are loving the assessment part of it. They just want, show me everything. And what are all those gaps in my environment? And then once I understand those, now how do I remediate those? How do I take action in an automated, routine, easy, accessible way? And I think there's two patterns there. First, do we understand those gaps, and how do we do that? Whether you use tools or whether you use, great resources like consultants and partners, like many of you represent, or do we use again the secondary challenge of, okay, we know the gaps. How the heck do we move forward on these faster? And I think that's where, whether it's scripts that you repackage and reuse, or whether it's tools, I think you need those smart, quick remediation opportunities. And that is absolutely not available out of the box. Yes, we have SAM, and there's things that help, but they're just not sufficient for our needs.
Yeah. The most important thing is, as you just mentioned, Richard, people don't have time. So if there is an idea that a company should move from 100 SharePoint sites to 25 SharePoint sites, yes, it's not rocket science to move files from A to B, but it's very, very time intensive and people don't have time. So it's like living in a house or apartment which is kind of messy, and you need to clean up your something, but people say, oh, yeah, I'm going to do it later when I have a holiday or whatever, so they always procrastinate.
Yeah. Later, exactly.
Later. Mañana.
After their holiday,
now, right?
Yeah. You know what? I was gonna go to Spain for 2 weeks, but instead, let's plan out our migration. Sounds fantastic.
Very relaxing. I think too, one of the things, and Ragnar, this goes back to your point of people wanting to control the data that the AI is going to look at. So I'll pull it down here, or I'll do it over here. We're having these conversations in the team channel, which we know culturally for most organizations, that is hard to get people to do.
Yeah.
To have those conversations openly, like in front of the other people in the team, right? We tend to go off on these one-on-one conversations. All these various scenarios, the sharing links. I noticed you all are doing the sharing links report, right? And that's something Orchestry brought out recently as well, is we tend to look at things like that, like, are we oversharing? And we're worried about oversharing, and we don't want to overshare. And most of the time with sharing links, it's an oversharing, right? We're going outside of the permissions of our teams and our channels. But if we're looking at those shadow AI situations where we're pulling data down, or we're going to one-on-one chat, well, now we're undersharing. Yeah. And now I'm asking AI, to give me insights about this, but it can't see all that. It doesn't know what Ragnar and Richard were talking about in the one-on-one chat because it can only see the channel chat. So now I'm making decisions based on a subset of conversations, a subset of emails, a subset of documents. I'm going to make a bad decision because I don't have all the data. That's a really big risk too.
SharePoint agents before, and now knowledge agents, and some degree of Copilot Studio based agents. So much of it is, I want to solve these problems. Where's that data, and how do I bring it in? And so the number one new category we're seeing for like support requests for access scenarios, et cetera, is actually agent based. Like people want, their agents, this bot experience, et cetera, to work a certain way, and that is great because now for the argument kind of the first time, you actually have a common dialogue. You have business saying, I want this data, they want the outcome to work in this way. And now you can say, great, we can do that. Let's, do it in the right way so we don't have to revisit this later, right? So you can keep doing this and there's no challenges later. So I think it definitely is the opportune time. And, if you're not in that agent world, then, you can always use that. Well, we need to get there, from a competitive perspective. And how do we get there? Well, these investments get us there. But I agree.
It makes Copilot more approachable for the data workers too. I think those that are living and breathing in their documents and their lists, their libraries, their SharePoint sites. Yeah. It's
you're actually going to, I know we've got a couple of minutes left, but Joy, that kind of segues into, I was going to ask a question. One of the stats that you have in the study is that 80% of organizations, or more than 80%, have already deployed or piloted Copilot. I know that, from all the conversations that we've had, I know Ragnar and I standing in a booth at various conferences, and everybody's piloting. Yeah. And we then struggled to find really huge enterprise deployments a year ago. Now we're starting to see larger and larger deployments where organizations are starting to, they've run their own numbers, they're seeing other benefits. What really separates those seeing real productivity gains from those that are struggling still with the quality of their content, or the other issues that are keeping them from seeing the benefits? Like what insights do you have from your study of why these companies are being successful in their larger deployments?
Yeah, so there's a great set of research Microsoft had between the work trend indexes and something called the AI strategy set. There's a bunch of reports they did in the past. And those reports basically showed at the time in early 2024 that 75% of organizations were in AI readiness, right? Like at the start of last year, they were about AI readiness. They were, very few were in pilot. And then, most people were definitely not realizing and scaling, right? In this year, right now, is some great new research, and it's basically showing that 75% plus organizations are in the pilot, scaling, and realizing. And realizing is like that later stage, right, that we all really want, where you get this really significant ROI from Copilot. And one of the things that we're seeing is what really accelerates people through that journey is sort of three levers. The first lever is consolidation. It makes a big difference. The more your data is in there, the less you both see shadow AI, because people say, oh, we can just use this because now everything's in one spot and we're not having to waiting for the IT, so we have to move the content ourselves. And the second item that's a big driver for it is basically organizations that say, we're going to treat this as a team, a scalable model. And what I mean by that is you have these organizational models of allocation where you give licensing for something like Copilot, and again, on the governance side as well, it's easier. And you focus on how does that team work? What are the assets, the spaces, the things that team uses? And then you make that team AI ready. You make that team not just AI ready, but AI successful and scalable. And then, you go through those journeys, and that drives significant success there. And there's this great analogy someone I was talking to recently said, they said, when we think of pilots, we often think of like, okay, running pilots. We have multiple pilots with Copilot, but that's also wrong. Like, and I love this I don't know if I can cite them, so I'll just say it. I love that they said, they love in pharmaceuticals, you have this process where you bring things to market and you have to go through safety first, and then efficacy, like, does this work really well? Is it helping? And then scale. So it's safety, efficacy, scale. these are phases, right? And what we should do with pilots is we should have every pilot, whatever the pilot is, whether it's a team, again, I think that's the right model based on evidence and data. So you have a team, they go through safety. That's the first stage of the pilot. That's obviously a lot of IT and governance. And then they get into efficiency. Is this driving benefit? Think of the ROI, think of the adoption, think of those journeys, and then scale. And you can't just jump to scale, right? Just like you can't jump for lots of reasons in, that example of phasing pilots, real world pilots for medical practices and things like that. And so I think that is a great way to think about this. And again, using that team layering and that approach leads to a lot of success. And then the third one, just for reference, that drives a lot of this is actually the, we'll call it business alignment. So this is like scenario-based stuff where you take the scenarios where Copilot and these AI tools can drive impact, and then you align those. And what is interesting is if you do those first two things we talked about, right, the data is consolidated, or at least connected and consolidated, and you've done this like team-based, model where you're phasing it properly, this takes care of itself. Because what people will do in that efficiency phase is they will discover so many processes, so many scenarios, so many things that they can do with AI, answering questions they never thought to ask, doing things they never did before, because now they have the ability to do and access it with AI. And that leads to the real, movement and shift in the business where we're starting to automate. I'm going to call it the people processes, not the capital P processes, because that stuff's in, big systems like ERP and Salesforce CRM systems, et cetera. So I think, again, the data and evidence shows us absolutely, if you're not in the piloting, scaling, and realizing stages, you are behind. Like the vast majority of the marketplace is there today. And then the question is like, how do we do that better? And, I've given a couple quick ideas there based on, again, real data and real world experiences from what we've seen at scale. And the cool thing with ShareGate, 100,000 plus IT pros use it, right? So like there's a lot of insights that, I'm so lucky to have access to through this, very wonderful set of Microsoft 365, community and leaders across customers. And, definitely what I just said is echoed in the data, what we're seeing.
It makes sense that team model works, because if you think about how Copilot actions on the graph too, keeping it in those cohorts and those, right, you're just going to get that better experience. Plus they're going to feed off each other and then show off that success to the rest of the org to start wanting to be one of the cool teams coming up next.
It makes it way easier for governance too. Instead of every user with all the different places that they might access, we're thinking of teams. Like, what is this team of users?
Yeah.
What are their main locations that they work in, et cetera? Yeah.
And that means that we need to add 3 little ingredients to your recipe, Richard. Ingredients, number 1, reduce shadow IT, reduce shadow AI. And the third one we just discovered is reduce shadow knowledge management. Because if you spend the whole day in single chats and not sharing in Teams channels anymore, you're just uploading into your own OneDrive and not using SharePoint anymore, then you would have shadow knowledge management.
Maybe that's a great topic. We talked about security a lot today, but we didn't talk about insecurity a lot, which drives a lot of what you're describing as well, right? Where people are storing that at a personal level, sometimes because they don't know better, but sometimes because they're like, well, this is mine this way, right? It's my like competitive advantage. And
because I'm highlighting and emphasizing this topic now here, because in your data and researches, Richard, we see a lot of concerns around security and access, permission, and this kind of controls, and this kind of insecurities and fears can lead to a culture where we just don't share anymore, because we are over preaching, and I'm talking literally to myself, we are over preaching this oversharing risks with Copilot, and then people are just afraid to share anymore, and this is a huge risk.
100%.
I've seen it. Yep.
So we would move from white to black, and we would miss out the beautiful shades of gray.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think that the 7th step to add to this system. So Richard, you're 3, Ragnar, yours, and the last one, have fun with it.
Yeah.
What?
Governance can be fun. I don't know.
I think it can. If just everyone tells me I'm a big nerd for that, but now
No, I agree.
Some people don't like it. Most people, I would say, statistically don't like it, but we like it, and probably everyone who watches this likes it. Like, let's lean into that. Like, if we can be that person who, you do the agents, you do this, I'll just do all this stuff so it works well and you can scale, right?
There's a certain runner's high that comes from redirecting, get this so that it's working in a way, so that we're getting data from this. It's being done the right way. Policies are being followed. I mean, again, I would challenge it, if you've not had this experience, to go and work with a company that is being audited and to get them back on track where they're paying fines. I've done a couple projects like that where I, as a consultant, was brought in to help kind of get things back on track. And again, there is a certain runner's high that comes from realignment, getting the organization moving in the right direction. So
fixing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Richard, really appreciate you joining the show. And of course, always welcome back. I know there's a lot more to go through. I'm sure we'll have you back this next year. And thank you, of course, everybody for watching. And Ragnar, Joy, Richard, we'll see you next week. Oh, and next month, we have finally Sue Hanley joining us. So it's locked. It's happening, folks. So make sure for episode 22 that you dial into that, and we'll see you next month.
Bye. Thanks, Richard.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.